Alright, hello friends, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Our Life, Beginnings and Always, Baxter's Root. You get to see my forehead this episode because my bangs are a little too long. It's uncomfortable, and I'm just tired of it, so every so often if you see me messing with them, it's because they don't like being in that position. They keep falling down, and they're gonna have to learn. But last episode, we started baking a cake for Jude and Scott for their wedding. We're about halfway through that now. We had a conversation with Baxter where he sort of revealed that he feels like a fraud. He has some self-confidence issues and feels like everybody else thinks poorly of him solely based on him thinking poorly of himself, and that's not true, but we'll work through that eventually. He's put it on pause for right now so we can sit in the living room, and that's about all we've got for this opening, so let's get into it. You opted for the sofa and eased yourself down into the variously colored cushions. It was a pleasant surprise to find that Baxter hadn't been kidding. Your seat was nice and plush. Your host busied himself at the fridge he'd been intimately acquainted with, fetching a can of sparkling water along with a filtered jug of still water. As he did so, you couldn't stop yourself from taking a peek at the refrigerator shelves from where you were sitting, wondering how much it resembled the one in his rented condo. Chinese food boxes? That had been a paltry and tragic affair, and thankfully it was a thing of the past. Baxter now kept a healthy range of foodstuffs in his own home. He was looking after himself. Good. Having taken care of the refreshments, Baxter made his way over to you and seated himself in a chair. Your glasses, filled with fresh condensation, were placed on the coffee table. He went to the effort of placing coasters underneath each one with his now free hands, okay? A minute's pause was filled by the two of you slowly sipping your drinks. Then Baxter returned his glass to its place and took a stab at conversation. He elected for something easy, starting to run over the plans for tomorrow once more, with a focus specifically on what you and he would be doing, rather than the happy couple.
Now,
to clarify, I will take care of the decorations in the morning alongside Terry, Miranda, and the other members of Jude's family. In the meantime, you'll need to... and so forth. It was a subject entirely within his wheelhouse, and you nodded vaguely along as he went through the itinerary in stages, asking him questions if you needed clarification. Eventually, he ran out of details to touch upon, and you both ran out of stuff to drink. It was decided that now was the time to tackle the remainder of the cake. In the kitchen once again, Baxter retrieved the carrot cake from the freezer and placed it on a wooden cutting board with the same gentleness as if it was a newborn baby. Now cut! What came next was entirely incomparable to childcare. He selected a large serrated knife from a block on the counter. You passed over the stencil, prepped earlier while he tested the surface of the cake with his fingers. Satisfied with the consistency and temperature, he put the stencil on top. There was a moment of adjustment, lining the paper up so that the cake was centered underneath. Then Baxter made a small murmur of relief.
Hallelujah.
Thank goodness the cake didn't turn out too small. It should be doable. All I have to do is follow the guidelines we have so nicely laid out. Yeah. No sweat. You stepped back to give him enough space to work without bumping his elbows. With a knife in one hand and the other pressing down on the stencil to steady it, Baxter set about carving. He worked slowly, methodically, removing the bulk of the excess with straight, clean cuts that merely scraped the outline of the stencil. Then, moving inwards, he began to refine the curved edges. The scraps of surplus cake were tossed into the pan it had been baked in, forming a small mound of crumbly fragments. You wondered if he'd ever watched Xavier do something like this before, or perhaps he'd seen one of the many cake competition shows on these days. He went at that cake fearlessly. Regardless, once there was no cake left protruding from underneath the stencil, he peeled back the paper to reveal a controller-shaped cake. Well, that was, of course, the expected outcome, the whole point of making a template, in fact. You experienced a thrill at seeing it work. Baxter was as happy about it as you were. He beamed up at you, making a brief jazz hands motion to emphasize the finished product, like he'd performed a magic trick. 1 controller cake, as ordered. Your hard work with the guideline paid off magnificently. Thanks. You did a good job.
It's doable.
Thank you as well. Now, in terms of decorating, I should be fine. Cutting a custom design was at the edge of my comfort zone. The remainder of the process will be much more manageable. I can decorate too?
Really?
Oh, that'd be very kind of you. We can make it a joint effort, then? He started to tidy the work surface up a little, sweeping stray crumbs and fragments of carrot cake into a cupped hand and shepherding them to the waste disposal. Baxter gathered the supplies. Is the waste disposal just my mouth? He brought out the bowls of frosting and arranged them in a neat line on the counter beside the cutting board. Pausing only to take a calming breath, Baxter took a smaller knife and began to heap frosting onto the controller, starting with the main red color of the body. It became readily apparent that Baxter's decorating skills hadn't improved since the last time he'd seen him attempt it. He had particular trouble with the cake's unusual geometry. It was harder than he'd expected to cover the sides evenly, especially when it came to the sharper corners. At first, the frosting was lumpy, with little wisps coming off where he'd pulled the knife out. After a while, he began to lag, frustration getting the better of him. He raised his messy, frosting-covered hands and looked at you imploringly. He was timing out. You switched places, taking up the station in front of the cake. Baxter hovered to one side. You picked up where he left off, distributing the bright red goop as best you could.
Bravo!
If it weren't for your assistance, Kit, I'd have thrown this cake out of the window by now. Some poor pedestrian down below would be having the worst night of their life. From there, you both added the remaining details using a couple makeshift piping bags. Those were engineered by simply snipping off the corners of some plastic Ziploc bags. The buttons and the joysticks were laid in with the not quite black, with some almost but not quite exactly white used for the markings. And that completed the illusion. The dessert had taken on the form of a modern electronic device. You and Baxter stood back to admire your handiwork. It didn't look bad at all. Mom would have said it was good enough to eat. It was never going to compete with a fully 3D creation like a commercial bakery could have made, but for a homemade cake prepared at the last minute, it would do just fine. Scott and Jude were going to love it. You were convinced. Baxter was fawning over the finished cake with a mixture of pride and abject relief. He wiped his forehead using the back of his hand, being careful not to smear himself with any of the frosting that still clung to his fingers. It's finished. We have a groom cake. With this, we can hope to see the couple's dreams fulfilled a little more fully.
You're incredible.
Thank you. I'm grateful for your help. Truly, this wouldn't have been possible without you. He tried to point out that he probably could have managed on his own, but Baxter dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. If not for your company, I'd likely be scraping cake off the walls. And besides, I wouldn't have suggested making the groom's cake in the first place if not for my prior experience with overnight confection catering.
See?
And I have you to thank for that. See? A watertight argument. You'll simply have to accept my appreciation. He fixed you with his most winning smile, attempting to dazzle you into submission. Fine, have it your way. I'm amazing. Where would this wedding be without me? You look down at the fruits, cake of your combined labor. If anything happened to that cake, you'd probably die. No, I guess overall you were proud of the effort. With the utmost care, Baxter proceeded to put the cake safely into a container and stow it in the fridge, arranging things so that it had its own dedicated shelf for ease of retrieval. A glance at the clock on his wall showed it past 1 in the morning. Oh no, you hadn't counted on finishing up that late. Baxter's expression tensed. He'd realized the same issue. Then his shoulders slumped, and he made a gripe of displeasure at the back of his throat.
Oh,
It'll be almost 2 a.m. by the time we get you back to Scott and Jude's house. I'm sorry, I should have been better prepared. Are you at least able to let yourself in? No. Speaking of being better prepared, you should definitely have thought to ask Jude for a spare key. I think I feel like I know what's gonna go on here. Ooh. Your couch looks really nice, Baxter. Not unless you have any spare hairpins laying around, because I don't have a key. Baxter's brow furrowed once again, and he began to worry his bottom lip with his teeth. You could almost see the machinery turning over in his brain. I see. It's far too late at night for us to wake them up, not with their extremely important day today. He ran a hand through his hair, letting his head fall back and sighing with exasperation. This has been a complete failure on my part. Seems I'm not a very good planner.
forgive me.
I can only apologize, Kit. You need your rest as much as everyone. If you aren't totally opposed to it, you could take the guest room here for the night. I keep it furnished just in case, though it has yet to see use. I'm surprised you have a guest room, but okay. You'd be welcome to sleep there, and I can drop you back off at Scott and Jude's in the morning, so you'd still have an opportunity to get changed before the event. Yeah, sleepover! Yeah, sounds good to me. Though you accepted the offer as calmly as you could manage, your mind was reeling. You were doing something you could have only ever dreamed of a few days ago. It's not that deep, but okay. It almost didn't seem possible. Life can be pretty amazing sometimes. I know it's not ideal, but thank you for being flexible, Kit. And here I was, thinking that it was my talent. His tone was light and humorous, filled with that typical Baxter sparkle, but you noticed that his eyes were softer, more restrained. He averted his gaze, seeming hesitant. I wonder if... He cut himself off, flinching before an imagined impact. He had raised a hand towards you, as if to touch the hand you had resting on the countertop. He thought better of it, reaching instead to pat you on the arm. Baxter didn't meet your eyes or even continue where he left off. We should get some sleep. Yeah, we should. Passing out in the middle of a wedding wasn't exactly on your bucket list. The two of you promptly made ready for bed. Baxter showed you down the hallway to the guest room, then rooted around in one of the bathroom cabinets for a spare toothbrush. You didn't have pajamas, and Baxter seemed either unwilling or simply too awkward about the situation to offer you any spares. It was fine. You'd manage with just the clothes you had. After satisfying himself that you were as settled as you could be, Baxter bade a brief farewell. Interesting colors in this room.
Take care.
Rest well. I'll be seeing you bright and early in the morning. I feel like I should just say goodnight. Though I do agree you did do something really nice today. I also kind of like this one, you know? I'll say that one, okay. A smile broke across his face. You never seem to run out of ways to surprise me, Kit. I worried it was merely an inconvenience. Heck no, this was fun as hell. But I had fun too. Baxter bobbed his head before ducking away completely inside his bedroom. He closed the door. You headed into your room, went straight over to the spare bed, and tucked yourself in. Sleep had the good grace not to keep you waiting, not after such a tiring day. Soon you were drifting off into a deep slumber, head empty save for the smell of unfamiliar bed sheets and carrot cake. You were woken by the shrill sound of an alarm that you vaguely remembered setting on your phone the night before. You fumbled around on the bedside table to turn it off. Sitting up in bed, bleary-eyed and yawning, you could see that it was a beautiful day. The sky was a pristine blue. That looks pink to me, but okay. The tops of the nearby buildings were gilded in the morning light. You dressed and ambled out of the living room, sleepily wondering what Baxter might have in the way of breakfast. That was until you were confronted with something that chased all thought of food from your head. Oh no. From down the hallway came a sort of clattering, thumping noise. Every so often you could make out a muttered curse and the sound of someone moving about. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. No, it was a door! Though you couldn't make anything out through the crack. The commotion was coming from inside. Was Baxter okay? You approached the door, curious as to what the commotion was about. The ruckus intensified as you got closer. It sounded as though California was experiencing a miniature earthquake localized entirely in the back corner of one of the 11th floor apartments, which was in the process of upending its belongings. You caught another snatch of Baxter's voice. There was a groan of frustration, and he muttered an expression that you could have sworn was clucking bell, or at least something very much like it. It's okay, you can say fucking hell. We're fine with cursing. Baxter? You called tentatively through the crack in the door, but there was no response. You tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. Peering into the room, you could see an untidy mess of pants and shoes and other articles of clothing littering the floor. You watched as a purple button-down sailed suddenly into view and landed in the heap. You strained your neck to peer as far around the door jamb as was possible, but could still see neither hide nor hair of Baxter Ward. Desperate times called for desperate measures. You pushed the door open, stepping a short way inside. On the same side of the room as the entrance, you discovered the opening to a walk-in closet, and at the far end of the closet, it took you a second to realize what you were looking at. I hate this game. There was Baxter Ward in the flesh. The flesh and almost nothing else. He happened to be rummaging through his collected wardrobe while wearing only Baxters. I'm done, I'm going to bed. See you later. To be fair, I cut it out of the first playthrough, but at one point in the game I accidentally called Cove Chode Holden, so Boxers seems like something that I would say. Anyway, he's rummaging through his collected wardrobe while wearing only boxers and a pair of socks. He'd been facing away initially, showing his exposed back. Oh wow, no, you're really— look at those! Okay. Then he turned and you were greeted with a full view of his naked torso. When your brain caught up with what was going on, you couldn't stop yourself letting out a snort of amazement. My ability to read is really going down. Baxter didn't startle, having caught sight of you in the corner of his peripheral vision. Hey.
Terrible morning, isn't it?
Sounds like it. This was kind of unexpected, but alright. You raised your hand in greeting is something that I would do. I don't know what to say here. I don't want to say speechless. My response would be, sure, sounds like it, but I guess the closest would be, sure, terrible morning it is.
How wonderful.
We agree. Baxter spun on his feet and resumed his work without explanation. Things good in here? Baxter gave a terse sigh, his fingers continuing to comb through his collection of shirts and jackets. They could be better, let's put it that way. I'm sorry my room is in such a state. You've caught me with my pants down in more ways than one. I simply can't find my work uniform. It's not an official matter, but there's a particular shirt I always like to wear when on duty at weddings, to help identify me as staff, you see.
I swear.
But it's missing. What I should have done was taken the time to set my clothes last night. Unfortunately, I was distracted with baking and frosting and a new guest in my home. His features took on a pinched, agitated quality, his eyes darting distractedly about the room. Either way, I have to hunt it down or we're going to be late. A faint edge of panic began to creep into his voice, and he started to upend the closet with increased urgency. I can't believe you conned me into thinking you'd gotten better with mornings. Is there something I can do to help? Baxter made a noise through his teeth. That won't be necessary. Thank you, though. I've already made such a mess of the place that you wouldn't be likely to make such headway. There always seems to be something waiting to go wrong. Baxter grumbled as he relentlessly shifted through the closet, as much to himself as to anyone else. He wondered if he had a habit of thinking aloud even when he was alone. Part of the tragedy of adult life is learning to roll with the punches, so to speak. I suppose I should be proud of the fact that I can at least handle it much better than when I was younger. Thinking about what kind of panic a younger Baxter would have been thrown into at the prospect of a missing shirt on an important day, he made a comical sputter of disgust, like he was experiencing a full-body shiver. He smiled, recalling the first time you'd ever interacted with Baxter this early in the day. It had left such a strong impression you doubted you'd ever forget. He'd been so flustered. It was like you'd stumbled across a whole different person wearing Baxter's pajamas and face. Nothing like the man you now knew, who was frustrated, sure, but still managed to approach the situation without letting it crush him, even in just his boxers. Your brain couldn't help but remind you of a strange coincidence, that Baxter almost undressed in front of you on that other occasion 5 years ago, okay? There was no almost about the present situation. No, we get it. We know. I can visually see. Aha! There was a sudden shout of euphoria from the back of the closet, jolting you out of your train of thought. Baxter stumbled back into the room, a black button-down clutched victoriously in one hand. Hallelujah. I found it. Finally.
Honestly.
A close call, if I ever had one. I appreciate you coming to lend your support, Kit. If you don't mind giving me a minute, I'll be dressed and with you shortly. Although, he gave a small giggle, looking down at himself. Since you've already seen me like this, it doesn't make much sense that the time you need to leave is while I put my clothes on. But still, I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch the cleanup of a train wreck. And between I'm not busy and seeing the cleanup sounds like fun, let's go with this. I don't know. Baxter's eyes briefly flitted to the ceiling, like he was making a silent plea to the heavens, what I've always wanted somebody to do, in my presence.
I see.
You're incorrigible, aren't you? It was said with an attempt at reproach, but his voice and face betrayed him. He couldn't help but break into a small smirk, not meeting your eyes. Oh, it did things to you. Okay. Not now. We have important work to do, and I'd hate for further distractions to get in the way of that. It's my job to be responsible today, you understand. Fun must wait. Why not relax in the living room while you can? We're going to be on our feet for hours once we leave this apartment. You'll thank yourself for it later. Oh, yeah. He made a fair point, of course, and you chastised yourself for forgetting what day it was. Although you reasoned that Baxter had distracted you first. Sort of. Accidentally. You can console yourself with the fact that he took your flirting shockingly well, as much as he might try to pretend. Not now was a phrase with a lot of implications. I was thinking the same thing, but I wasn't going to comment on it. But if we can, yeah, I mean, I noticed that was certainly a reaction. Maybe Baxter was right to call you a hopeless case. No more dawdling. Or dawdling, I don't know. I already say the W first. Alright, I'll see you. You left him to get decent alone and headed out to the living room, lofting yourself on the first squishy surface you could find. It wasn't long until Baxter appeared. You were gazing out a window when you heard the click of shoes on the hard floor, followed shortly after by the man himself, sauntering into view. He was smartly dressed in black from top to tail. His slacks were crisp and pressed, his shoes polished, and miraculously his shirt seemed to have survived the ordeal without getting creased. The crisis is over, thank goodness. I'll procure our cake from the fridge and then we should be on our way. Is that fine? You readily agreed, picking up your bag and joining him by the front door. Do I have a bag? A short trip down the elevator, and both you and the cake were safely bundled into Baxter's car. He pulled out of his parking space and set a course for the suburbs once more. It was still early, the air crisp as it wafted through the rolled windows. Baxter leant one arm on his door, cool and casual. Since we're keeping our creation a surprise, I'll take it to the venue. So don't worry about leaving it here. I'll hop out with you to say hello to the betrothed, though.
Now?
As for what happens next, I thought we could... The pair of you naturally waded into a discussion on the the little things of the wedding plan. You'd already been over most of it, but it was confidence boosting to have it laid out one more time. As Baxter described it to you once, weddings and similar occasions were a kind of ritual. You supposed that obsessing over the little details was a crucial part of another kind of ritual. Surprisingly, you had begun to feel almost like Baxter's colleague, a fellow planner endeavoring to bring this event to fruition. You'd certainly put in the work by this point. The conversation didn't stop at your own responsibilities for the day. Baxter reiterated that he, together with Terry, Miranda, and the other members of Jude's family, would be decorating the wedding hall over the course of the morning. The marriage would be conducted in the late afternoon, with a sit-down dinner reception in the evening, so there was still plenty of time to prepare. This detour back to Scott and Jude's was for you to change into your outfit. You couldn't exactly come to the big day in the casual clothes you'd slept in the previous night. You'd regroup with the rest of the crew after freshening up. Even though Jude at least knew the reason for it, your cheeks got heated at the prospect of showing back up with Baxter after spending the night at his place. It felt so scandalous, oh my god. Mr. Ward didn't give the same impression as Terry or Cove or any of the other men you knew, really. Crashing with them was totally cool, no questions to be had. But Baxter? Someone both suggestive and inaccessible. Staying at his apartment would raise eyebrows. And that was without mentioning the fashion in which your morning had started. It's too late to take it back now. Not that you would even want to. You relished the final calm before the storm until Baxter stopped the car across the street from the soon-to-be Adam house. That was typical, though this time he didn't pull up on the driveway because there was already an occupant stationed there. A shockingly red sports car had been parked facing the road, its spotless painted body gleaming in the ever-intensifying rays of sun. The rental, you assumed. Baxter had come through, yet again. It was almost exactly the same shade as the controller cake tucked safely away on the back seat. You'd bet good money that Jude the motorhead wouldn't be the only one thrilled to ride in it. Walking past the vehicle on the way to the front door, you and Baxter paused to admire the sleek profile and elegant curves. The Corvette somehow looked better up close. The gloss of the paint was reflective. In the entryway, Baxter rapped on the door with a knuckle. You noticed that he did this in spite of the fact that there was a doorbell. Maybe just another one of his inexplicable mannerisms. After a brief pause, there were footsteps inside, and then Scott was standing in the open doorway. He greeted you enthusiastically, full of restive energy. Hey, welcome back. Oh, and Baxter too. Good morning. Being confronted by the groom you were in the process of keeping a secret from caught you off guard. It would have been prudent to go over the plan for this on the ride over. Not really, just, hey, need to get changed and get ready, let's go, my man. Baxter, however, had no problem acting fine under pressure.
How are you?
Good morning to you, Scott. And how are you feeling today? Excited? Nervous?
I don't know.
Maybe both? No, yeah, definitely both. I thought I'd never sleep, and there was more commotion in the hallway. Jude came jogging up behind to greet you over Scott's shoulder.
You made it.
That was your night with Terry and Randy, Kit. Yeah, we had a sleepover. His demeanor was cool and calm, exuding total confidence despite the nonsensical question. You quickly surmised that sleeping over at your friend's place must be a cover story. You hastened to school your expression, not wanting to give the game away. Oh, yeah, it was great fun. We were up all night swapping embarrassing sibling stories. I'll never be able to look at you the same way, Jude. You relished the brief flash of panic that crossed Jude's face before he remembered it was a work of fiction. Since you'd put yourself out for him, you reasoned there was no harm in a little teasing. Fortunately, Scott wasn't the least bit suspicious, his mind obviously preoccupied on more matrimonial topics. You could practically see the daydream bubble of Scott skipping down the aisle. I wanted to stop by, briefly, to see how you were both feeling before this afternoon, and happened to bump into Kit on the driveway. Well rested, Jude?
It's good.
Somehow managed to get Scott to go to bed, too. That's true. Jude knows the art of relaxation.
Of course.
It's wonderful there's nothing to worry about on that front. Everything is running smoothly with regards to the preparations. Here, Baxter gave Jude a meaningful look, who cracked into a small grin behind Scott's back. Message received. So you can focus on getting yourselves ready for your moment without concern. Although if anything comes up, please don't hesitate to give me a call. You stifled a giggle through that exchange in spite of yourself. Seeing Baxter suavely passing veiled messages when he'd been such a frantic mess half an hour before was too funny. Honestly, the fact that he was able to pull such an abrupt about-face to let his own stress fade into the background and Excuse me? I just read the next line. Fade into the background in service of pure professionalism. Gross. Boo. And just like that, you weren't in danger of laughing anymore. Baxter cleared his throat, glancing at his phone. I best get to the venue since everything is in hand here. Terry and Miranda have already arrived there.
I appreciate this.
Don't let us keep you. And thanks, Baxter, for everything. We really appreciate what you've done for us. Jude made as though to offer his agreement, but Baxter smiled and raised a hand to stem the flow of gratitude.
My pleasure.
You're too kind. However, as it stands, my job is only half finished. I'll be only too happy to accept your words once the wedding is over. To do so now would be premature. Sure, dude. But thanks, anyway. Jude met your gaze as he said this, to include you in the sentiment. You silently hoped that your baking lived up to his rising hopes. Baxter nodded and turned to leave before doubling back to catch you briefly by the elbow. I'll see you later, Kit. Terry should come by to pick you up once you've had an opportunity to get changed. See you later, B-Man. Baxter smiled warmly and gave your arm a nearly imperceptible squeeze before letting go. His goodbyes said, Baxter wasted no time. He strolled briskly down the driveway and got into his car, sparing you a wave as he drove away. Behind you, Scott cleared his throat.
So?
Come in, Kit. Jude and I were starting to get ourselves ready. Do whatever you've got to do. Oh, and there's finally a key for you. Thanks. It's on the kitchen counter. Yeah, we remembered that one a little late. They certainly had, but you couldn't pretend as if you asked for it. Or that you were mad you got more time with Baxter. Now I have some pants to iron. He vanished into the house, a spring in his step. As you were crossing the threshold, Jude mumbled to you under his breath. Hey, help yourself to the food in the kitchen. Not sure if you had to pass on breakfast this morning or... He spoke guiltily, but you brushed it aside. You lost out on some sleep, but the look on Scott's face would be worth it. It's okay. Thanks, Jude. You were left to your own devices for the remainder of the morning. Availing yourself of Jude's offer, you cobbled together a quick breakfast before heading upstairs and taking a well-earned shower. As a treat for working hard, you indulged in the hot water for a while. But eventually, you returned to the other guest room that had been loaned to you and hauled your suitcase onto the bed before fishing out your wedding attire. I'm gonna go full suit. It was a relief to see that the journey hadn't wrinkled anything too much. You weren't going to be turning heads for the wrong reasons. Examining yourself in the mirror, you were reminded of another formal occasion, another summer. This time, you were the one who'd packed a suit for a trip away from home. It had seemed so eccentric when you were 18, but now that you were attending someone's wedding, it was totally reasonable. Baxter still probably took formal attire everywhere he went, for good reason or no. When you had your look finalized, there was little left to do other than wait for Terry to come collect you. It felt funny to be loafing about the house, dressed to the nines. Fortunately, you weren't left to your own devices much longer. Shortly before noon, a car honked, and your phone alerted you of a text. It was Terry, thoroughly making you aware that he'd arrived. You sprang to your feet from the sofa you'd been lounging on, pausing in the hallway to give a quick goodbye to Scott and Jude, wherever they were, and then dashed out the front door. Terry's van was parked across the street, in the place Baxter's car had occupied before. You went around to the passenger side and popped the door open.
Preposterous!
Somebody's looking fancy. Where are you going today? Over in the driver's seat, Terry was wearing a swanky-looking waistcoat and an enormous grin. He looked so eager that, if you hadn't known any better, you'd have guessed it was him getting married. You pulled out your sweetest, most puppy dog-eyed expression, milking it for everything it was worth. I'm on my way to a wedding, but it's oh so far to walk in the heat. What's a poor, helpless person to do? Terry laughed uproariously. Oscar-winning material right there. Now hurry up and get in already. The Eckerts are waiting at the venue. You did as instructed, climbing into the cab and buckling yourself in. Terry rammed the van into gear and pulled off, wasting no time in heading back the way he came. As the car picked up speed, he drummed his hands on the steering wheel animatedly. It's finally here, the big one. Ready for it. Just try not to bawl too loudly during the vows, okay?
Yeah!
What? Not you too? Miranda stuffed almost a whole box of tissues in her purse this morning, just in case. Not that bad. Okay, sure. There was that one time with the video of the three-legged kitten where I cried so hard I couldn't see and walked straight into a wall. But we don't talk about that. Besides, Cove's coming. How's anybody gonna talk about me when the master is right there? He'll have us treading water before anyone can say I do. That's true. You know what? Valid. It made sense his emotions were shown via tears, most of all. Cove was a child of the sea. Only fitting that his happiness would overflow in the form of salt water. He whiled away the journey in idle conversation, most of it wedding-focused. The preparations were already well underway, but Terry was keen to stress that your insistence would be very welcome. The route brought you into the heart of the city. Both the wedding and the reception were to be held on an upper floor of one of the many skyscrapers that dominated the urban sprawl. Terry parked in a lot under the shadow of the high-rise, and after an extended elevator ride, the doors opened. You stepped into a spacious room, flooded with sunlight.
So?
And here we are. Impressive, isn't it? They know how to pick a place. You couldn't help but agree. The wedding hall, which was basically an entire floor of the building, boasted floor-to-ceiling windows. The effect was dizzying. The whole city was at your feet. You weren't able to admire the view for long, however. The place was in a frenzy of preparation. No sooner had you arrived than you were being swept up in it. Baxter made a beeline for you in the moment he heard the elevator doors open, his wedding planner persona firmly in place.
Nice to see you.
Excuse the brevity, but as you can see, we're well underway with setting out the centerpieces already. You exchanged a brief nod of acknowledgement before he gestured for you and Terry to join Miranda, hard at work by a table at the far end of the hall. Ooh, okay. She was wearing a simple yet elegant pink dress, and her long hair flowed in rivulets of immaculately arranged curls. Terry called out to her in greeting, and she turned and waved you over, beaming. Great, you're here. You look lovely, Kit. You made it back to Jude and Scott's without any trouble, I guess? She huddled in closer and gave a furtive look around the room, as if her brother's fiancé might be in earshot by some freak accident.
Thank you.
Baxter filled us in on your alibi. Thank you so much for making an extra cake. I know Jude was beating himself up over that. She pointed to a table a short distance away. An unassuming white platter and cover rested there. A gift from one groom to another, courtesy of Kit and Baxter's Bakery. Yeah, it looks pretty great. Scott's gonna love it for sure. I sure hope so. They both will. Now, let's get to it. Terry let out a startled grunt as Miranda dumped a box of guest favors into his arms before picking up another two of her own. Sorry, we don't have time to stand around. Kit, would you grab that last box over there? We need to take them to... A hectic afternoon of busy work ensued. Everyone had been saying it, but this was something you only ever truly understood while in the thick of it. There was so much to do. Tables to decorate, seating plans to consult, name cards to sort, rows of chairs to set out, garlands to hang, and ribbons to tie, and candles to place into candlesticks. Miranda's parents were sitting at one of the dining tables, dressed in a matching suit and dress, folding napkins like their lives depended on it. They'd clearly been practicing. It was funny, you thought, while unpacking the centerpieces, to see so many people whizzing about in formal clothing. You wondered if this was what butlers felt like all the time. At the eye of the storm was Baxter, coordinating the efforts with poise and expertise beyond his years. The tension only served to make him sharper, more focused in his pursuit to perfection. He was the common nexus to all of your efforts, the axle around which the room revolved, faster and faster. You supposed this was just another kind of dance to him. It felt impossible to keep track of everything that was happening. You blinked, and then Xavier was there, delivering their confectionery masterpiece in its grandeur. Enjoying the concealed groom's cake on the dessert table, you happened to catch a glimpse of Xavier sneaking a peek under the lid. It looked like they approved. Maybe. There was, surprise, surprise, not a spare minute to stop and chat with them directly. They had a business to get back to, and you were also otherwise occupied. So occupied, in fact, that several hours passed without you realizing it.
Huh?
That better be the last one. I'm never straightening another place setting for the rest of my life. Terry slumped into a chair, making a big show of looking short of breath. Miranda plopped herself down in the chair next to him and gave him a playful jab in the ribs with her elbow. Wish granted. There's not a lot of reasons you need to do that again. Huh, you could have let me milk the drama for a little bit. Sorry again. Too late now. You've solved it. We should... Hey, you okay? Terry put a hand on Miranda's shoulder, concerned. She had begun massaging the backs of her ankles, wincing a little.
It'll be okay.
It's just these shoes. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to prepare the venue in this new pair when I could have worn my regular sandals and swapped them out before the guests arrived. Sorry. At least there's not a lot of reasons you need to decorate a wedding in pumps again. Yeah, you solved it. Miranda startled at a loud clapping that rang through the hall. Baxter was standing at the far end, his hands together. The room, quickly, fell silent.
Bravo!
If I could have your attention, everyone, I think I'm right in saying that we've now completed the necessary preparations for the main event. You've performed an admirable job. From this point on, the wedding should proceed without any further difficulties, so I'd like to invite you to enjoy the special occasion starting now. You've earned it. With that said, I've received word from the receptionist that the guests have begun to congregate in the foyer downstairs. You need only to join them to wait for the grooms to make their arrival. Thank you. You shared a look with Terry and Miranda before the three of you, with no small amount of effort, got onto your feet. As you headed for the elevators, Baxter came alongside. The attention was off of him for the moment, and he eased into a more casual posture, with one hand in his pocket. Very suave. He addressed you each in turn. Terry, Miranda, Kit. Good work, each of you.
Thank you.
In my capacity as an organizer, I wouldn't normally say this, but it's been a relief to be able to count on you today. This whole week, in fact. Don't say that. It was the least I could do for Jude, even in spite of his, lack of forethought. She sighed. I feel bad you weren't seeing my brother at his best all the time. I love him, but sometimes his head is completely up his own ass. Baxter's cool countenance gave way to a sudden snort, which he tried and failed to cover up with his hand. He'd never anticipated Miranda, of all people, being the one to say such a thing. It was rare, but she knew how to choose her moments carefully. It was always a bit of a treat. Terry gave a dramatic gasp of indignation and rounded on her with false admonishment.
Yeah.
Randy, you can't say ass at the wedding. Miranda only grinned up at her boyfriend, innocent as an angel. It's a good thing for us both that the wedding hasn't started yet. It was no good trying to keep a straight face. Both you and Baxter exchanged helpless glances before joining in on the laughter wholeheartedly. It had been tiring. You were feeling it now more than ever, but you'd made it through with a little help from your friends, and no small amount of silliness. Baxter cleared his throat, regaining his composure to the best of his ability.
So...
That being said, we should get our, butts downstairs. After you, Kit. You piled into the elevator and made the ride down to the lobby, prickling with anticipation as the floor number grew closer and closer to 1. The double doors opened to bustling energy. A thronging host of guests were lingering about, chattering excitedly among themselves. Baxter gave a proper tip of his head and darted off into the crowd, ostensibly to take care of arrangements for when the couple arrived. Terry and Miranda followed not far behind. You stayed put while they went around to give welcomes. Unlike you, they knew a fair number of the people in attendance. Still, there was one ever-familiar face in the crowd. Cove Holden? I like that I do that every single time he appears. Towering impressively over almost everyone else, yet standing awkwardly off to one side, was a man with a gentle face and hair the color of sea glass. Oh, that's so mean. He'd be so, shocked and embarrassed. I will go over there. You darted into the crowd, making for Cove like he was your lighthouse in the storm. The waves parted, and soon enough you were skidding to a halt, almost crashing right into him. Damn. Cove had spotted the movement out of the corner of his eye and lifted his arms as if to steady you.
Oh!
Hey. I mean, I've seen this outfit before, but technically speaking, not in this. Cove had gone for something simple, yet stylish. A nice pair of slacks and a sleek, low-cut shirt that emphasized his tall build. You returned your focus to his face to see a bashful expression. What's up?
Kit!
I missed you. His tenor was soft, full of sincerity. It tugged at your heartstrings to hear it in person again. I mean, I know it's only been not even a week, but that's okay. I missed you too. It was the kind of sensation that you only truly recognized the instant you gave voice to it, but it was the truth. You'd been missing Cove all the way through this ordeal. And hearing his feelings echoed back at him, Cove positively beamed. You basked in the shared sentiment for a while, not really speaking, content to simply be together.
So,
How did it go with the preparation and stuff? With, Baxter, the wedding planning? There was a faint upward lilt to the way he said Baxter's name, kind of like he was unsure if he remembered it correctly. Though, of course, that wasn't really the reason. Cove had found it just as hard as the rest of you to believe that your old acquaintance had reappeared. He was still not yet accustomed to including the name in his vocabulary. It's been eventful. Cove giggled unexpectedly at your response. I get it, because it's an event, so of course it would be eventful. Okay, that was completely unintentional. And if it hadn't been, you would have been ashamed of such a bad pun. The Cove seemed so sincerely tickled that you didn't have the heart to break it to him. Your reunion was cut short by a sudden shift in the surrounding ambiance. The constant hubbub was rising in intensity, reaching a fever pitch. Something was happening. All around you, people were turning to face the entrance, craning their necks and peering around each other to get a better look. Through the glass doors, you made out a familiar splash of scarlet. There were several appreciative whispers from the congregation. A low whistle came from somewhere nearby, and you overheard a guest announce to his neighbor that the car was a Corvette. Baxter was at the head of the assembly, waiting and ready to throw open the doors. Ooh, they actually get outfits! That would be kind of weird if they showed up in their normal outfits, to be fair. Two men exited the stylish ride, dressed in even more fashionable suits. The grooms had arrived. You'd peeked at the photographs from their shopping spree, so you'd known what to expect, but there was always something different about seeing it in person. When Scott and Jude entered the building, the crowd parted, forming a corridor to let them pass. They would be leading the way back up to the hall from here. The crowd was shepherded into the elevators and stages, heading back up top. Baxter stayed hard at work directing the incoming traffic and ensuring that everybody promptly found a seat. You and Cove had arrived early and snagged a row of 4 somewhere near the front. Terry and Miranda had appeared afterwards and took the 2 spares. Soon the elevator doors closed for the last time, and the final few stragglers eased into place. The betrothed were behind everyone, waiting patiently. All at once, like everyone could sense it, a hush fell over the crowd. Peering over your shoulder, you saw Baxter give a curt nod to the officiant before fiddling with a miniature remote. From hidden speakers, you heard the opening bars of music you couldn't place, something measured yet upbeat, and every head in the room swiveled to watch Scott and Jude walk down the aisle. They were bound for an elegant archway that had been erected right beside one of the enormous windows. As they drew near to it, the afternoon sunshine haloed them with gold. The music fell silent. All was still. The last 5 days of your lives had been a whirlwind, a long, stressful journey towards this singular moment. You gazed at the joyful faces of the 2 men in front of you, and saw none of that. Here, at last, was the magic to the ritual. They were 2 figures, radiant, bathed in sunlight. They stood hand in hand with the whole world beneath them, and had eyes only for each other. The ceremony itself was brief, with no unnecessary pomp and circumstance, but suffused throughout with sweetness. Their officiant gave a welcome before proceeding with opening words on the subjects of commitment, of family, and of love. The exchange of vows and rings immediately followed, promises to be there for one another in good times and in bad. Scott went first, reading his vows from a little card. Jude did his from memory, his voice trembling with emotion. You tried to focus on every word, but became a little distracted by your friends. Let me guess, Cove's crying. 2 seats down from you, Miranda was wordlessly dealing out Kleenex to Terry and Cove, who, on cue, had begun to weep. She then dabbed at her own face, teary-eyed herself. Thereafter came the candle-lighting ceremony, and a moment of quiet intimacy, save for the odd sniffle. The grooms each lit their own smaller tapers separately before igniting the large unity candle together. One by one, he watched as their hopes for the day were realized. Baxter had been right. The whole thing went off without so much as a hitch. Well, besides the people getting hitched, of course. It went so smoothly, in fact, that it was nearly over in no time at all. There was one final matter to take care of. With a broad smile and a booming voice, the officiant pronounced the marriage completed. You may now... Oh, there wasn't any point in finishing. The crowd has erupted in cheers before they could get that far. Scott's restraint had held right up until the final moment, but being forced to wait any longer to kiss his husband was a bridge too far. He jumped the gun and chewed, but it wasn't like it mattered. The hall filled with the sound of laughter, and a huge clattering went up as the whole congregation got noisily to their feet. The newly wedded Mr. and Mr. Adam turned to face the crowd of their family and friends, eyes bright, heads held high. They stood and waved before linking arms and striding back up the aisle. They shook hands and smiled with all and sundry, leading a growing procession over to the far end of the hall, where the reception tables were laid out, waiting. Just like that, the ceremony was over, and it was time to start the party. And perhaps it is also time to end the episode. You know it was coming. We're getting, close to the end of the video, of course. And this seems like a good place to end it, I'm really happy that Cove is here. I know this is Baxter's route, and I know that I've been saying that I've been really enjoying the way that Baxter has grown, and I'm supposed to be focusing on him, but I miss Cove Holden. I'm glad he's here, if only for a little bit. Though I am excited to see the rest of Baxter's route and see what happens next, because I don't think that it's over just because, the wedding is almost over, I think there's more after, from what I understand, and I have no idea what's gonna happen next. We're gonna have the reception, and then what? I know there's more after that, but I have no idea what it is. But I'm excited to see that, and I hope that you are as well. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you next time for the reception and the little party.